Azora Edo Integrated Power Project to add 450 megawatts to the national power grid. CBN and China signed $2.5 billion currency swap agreements. Nigeria's net pension assets value of the contributory pension fund hits 7.7 trillion naira. Africa Development Bank says Africa needs about $170 billion annually to meet its infrastructure requirements. Plus, equities market closed Thursday in a negative territory. Details of these and more on this edition of Business Express. Glad to have you join us. In the news today, the federal government says the completion of the Azora Edo Integrated Power Project will add 450 megawatts to the national grid. Minister of Power, Works and Housing Babatunde Fashola, who said this, noted that Azora had notified him on the completion of its plant and its readiness to commence operation. He said with this positive development, 450 megawatts of electricity is expected to be transmitted to the national grid any moment from now. The Azora Edo IPP is a 450 megawatt open cycle gas turbine power station being constructed near Benin City in Edo State. It is phase 1 of a 1,500 megawatt integrated power project facility located on a 100-hectare site large enough to accommodate future expansion of the power plants. Oil prices rose on Thursday, boosted by OPEC production cuts and the potential for new U.S. sanctions against Iran, but gains were limited by growing U.S. crude inventories. Brent crude futures rose 26 cents to settle at $73.62 US a barrel, a 0.35% gain, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude rose 50 cents to settle at $68.43 US a barrel, a 0.74% increase. Global oil prices have tightened with production cuts led by the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies. The latest data shows that OPEC pumped around 32 million barrels per day in April, slightly below its target of 32.5 million barrels per day, due largely to plunging output in Venezuela. Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) has restated its determination to ensure that every shareholder is fairly treated and given sufficient information regarding transactions in the capital market. Acting Director General of SEC, Ms. Mary Uduk, stated this in Lagos. She noted that over the last 3 years, the Commission has approved approximately 120 mega-related transactions. This translates to an average of 40 merger-related transactions every year. The nature and structure of these transactions vary in line with the objectives of the transacting entities and operational sectors. China's bilateral trade with Nigeria rose by more than 30% to $12.3 billion in 2017. The two countries established formal diplomatic relations in February of 1971. Let's join Bosede Abel for this background reports.
Pressure on dollar demand to fund transactions by importers will now reduce, and the bilateral trade between Nigeria and China is expected to further rise following the execution of $2.5 billion currency swap agreements by the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN) and the People's Bank of China. The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, led the CBN officials, while People's Bank of China Governor Yi Gang led the Chinese team at the official signing, a culmination of over 2 years of negotiations by both central banks. The currency swap, which simply means an agreement to exchange currency between two foreign parties, will make it easier for most Nigerian manufacturers, especially small and medium enterprises and cottage industries in manufacturing and export businesses, to import raw materials, spare parts and simple machinery to undertake their businesses. The deal, which is purely an exchange of currencies, will also make it easier for Chinese manufacturers seeking to buy raw materials from Nigeria to obtain enough naira from banks in China to pay for their imports from Nigeria. The transaction is aimed at providing adequate local currency liquidity to Nigerian and Chinese industrialists and other businesses, thereby reducing the difficulties encountered in the search for the third currencies. The development will enhance and reduce volatility in naira-dollar exchange rates and boost bilateral trade between Nigeria and China. Acting Director Corporate Communication Isaac Okorafor said, with the transaction, Nigeria becomes the third African country to have such an agreement in place with the People's Bank of China.
Many thanks, Bosede. To speak on CBN's $2.5 billion swap deal with China, as well as easing foreign exchange volatility, I have with me a development economist, Odilim Ewegbara. Welcome to Business Express.
Thank you for having me.
Going by that background report, what is your impression of this swap?
Oh, it is something that we would have done about 3 or 4 years ago, but thank God that we have done it now. Countries like South Africa did it in 2015. And of course, South Africa got 30 billion yuan. Nigeria got 16 billion. But in any case, it's something that is worth applauding this government for.
But why did it take so long? Because it seems like after so many years of negotiation, finally it comes through. What took so long?
It took so long because China was very concerned about the stability of the naira and also our foreign reserve status. So when they discovered that the naira is improving, especially the naira has become stable. The fluctuation in the exchange rate between the naira and the dollar has been somehow normalized. And because of more revenue to the government as a result of the price of oil going up, so China feels that it can do business with Nigeria with regards to currency swap.
Now, talking about foreign exchange fluctuations, how do you think the interests of Nigerian investors and importers will be protected?
It's a complex issue. In as much as I welcome this, we have to, the devil is in the detail, because tomorrow, you know, if you have something like currency, you know, some people now doing over-invoicing, and as a result, it will now require more naira in order to get more of our goods overseas. But my concern is that what if tomorrow China comes to buy our oil using yuan? That is renminbi, if you wish.
Would you then say it's
what if China comes to buy all our commodities that most Nigerians would like to sell their commodities in dollars? So what do? That is where the devil in the detail lies.
That brings me to the question, is it then a level playing ground?
You cannot say it is, because it's not supposed to be. China is a more industrial economy. Nigeria is a more commodity-driven economy. So the only thing it will help is that it puts aside the United States dollars, because you would know that the dollar has been a reserve, de facto reserve currency of the world since 1945, and by 1971, the then president of the United States, that's Nixon, just removed the backing of the dollar with gold and floated it, and as a result, the U.S. was printing its currency as it wished and flooding it to the international market. Now, because the Nigerian consumption of made in China has grown to up to 30%, so why should the dollar be in between these two countries? So there's a need for the dollar to be kept aside. I want that, but also we want to make sure that the Chinese do not use it as an opportunity to buy commodities that we actually would prefer to sell in dollars.
Okay. Now let's expatiate a little bit on the benefits of this agreement.
To Nigerians, you know, if you're a Nigerian importer, you don't need to go and look for the dollar. And you know, each time you look for the dollar, you have to exchange naira to a dollar. And when you get the dollar, you have to exchange it to yuan. Then you see the transaction costs continue to increase. And sometimes you cannot have the dollar available. But what happens now is that you build your goods in yuan, and the Nigerian banks will give you the yuan. They may not give you cash, but you know, through LCs, you get your goods paid for. The only problem I have is currency round tripping, because so many people will now, because not every good we have access to this. Those goods that do not have access to, that have access, might do over-invoicing and do round-tripping in order to use the excess to import those goods that are not accessing the swap arrangement. That is where the CBN has to work extremely hard to make sure that those who are importing finished goods that are supposed to be made in Nigeria or that are already made in Nigeria should not access this swap arrangement.
Okay, part of the deal of this swap arrangement is to make transactions easier for small and medium enterprises importing goods into the country. How do you see this working out?
No, it is good, because a small importer who wants to import machinery will just go to his bank, but unfortunately we're choosing 4 banks. But when I went through why the 4 banks were chosen, it is because these are the 4 banks that have representation in China. They could go to any of these 4 banks and open an LC. They don't need to go through a long process, and they will get the plant and equipment paid for and shipped to Nigeria. And also to export things to China, they will have difficulty, because all they need to do is to invoice in naira, and the goods get to Chinese, and Chinese pay in naira.
We're kind of moving away from the dollar, because there's the swap means that the yuan is going to be in place. So is it a situation whereby investors or importers are having to choose, or is it a case of, hey, this is a less troublesome transaction because we are using their currency? So is it an advantage, or is it more options?
It's more advantageous to China. You know, China has $4 trillion in dollar foreign reserve, and it doesn't know what to do with it. If China goes to ask for this dollar, the United States will print dollars and give to, and then they value it by the 4 trillion is given to China. So China is gradually trying to exit the dollar. But also China is positioning yuan to become the reserve currency of the world, because over a period of time, most countries will discover they buy more from China, they do more transactions with China than with the United States, if not because of oil. Then why do you have to bring the third currency? This third currency is actually very fluctuating, and this third currency, nobody has power over it. And unfortunately, the products America ship around the world have become so minimal that it does no longer have power over have a lot of impact on the dollar. So the need to exit the dollar has been, in fact, the European Union has also joined the yuan, the yuan swap. So for me, it is good. And for me, Nigeria should ask for more to benefit from this, not just giving the Chinese importers of commodities. Because importers of commodities who are supposed to pay me, for example, if I'm exporting cocoa, I would prefer dollar because it gives me more flexibility. But if I have to export my cocoa in yuan, and of course it gives me naira because I am not going to access your yuan, then I am not benefiting, because at the end of the day, I am tied with a lot of naira. But there's another thing I want to say before you close. You see, the problem is that China is giving us $16 billion, $16 billion, 16 billion yuan, sorry. but we do not know how much naira that actually we are giving in exchange. Because what I would have expected is, because in other countries, you see, this is the amount China is giving, this is the amount of their own currency they are taking, they are bringing to the table. As I'm talking with you now, I don't know whether it is 1 trillion naira that we are bringing to the table, or is this as a result of fluctuation, whatever the exchange rate, dollar changes, we increase the number of, or we reduce the number of naira we bring to the table. That issue must be dealt with.
That brings me to the subject of foreign exchange management and financial stability. What role does this swap play?
Because 30% of our consumptions come from China, it will put less pressure on the dollar. So we have more dollar in our foreign reserve. But there's a problem here. You see, if it puts less pressure on our dollar, it gives more value to the naira. And if it gives more value to the naira, it gives us the tendency to import more. Not actually from China, but from other countries. Then it does not give it the leeway to start producing most of these goods locally, because then it gives naira false value. So I would also suggest that we must do something to ensure that in as much as we engage in this, we protect our small businesses, which means Chinese cheap goods should not use this opportunity to flood the Nigerian market by putting tariffs. We have to impose tariffs on such goods, because the swap issue is for exchange of industrial materials by Nigerians, and Chinese might use it to exchange raw material. The Chinese should not use it to dump consumer products that are cheaply made in China that will displace Nigerian-made, locally made consumer goods.
Odilim Ewegbara, a pleasure having you on Business Express.
Thank you for having me.
We have been talking to Odilim Ewegbara. He is a development economist. Now to pension matters. Nigeria's net pension asset value of the contributory pension fund has hit 7.779 trillion naira as of February 28, 2018. Also, contributors have grown by 390,000 as increase from 7.50 million contributors as at March 31st, 2017 to 7.89 million contributors as at December 31st, 2017, and then to 7.90 million contributors as at February 28, 2018. Acting Director General National Pension Commission, Mrs. Aisha Dahiru Umar, said the growth represents an increase of 270 million, up from a value of 7.52 trillion as at December 31st last year. She attributed the increase to a new contributions received, interest and coupon from fixed income securities, and net realized and unrealized gains on equities and mutual fund investments. The Africa Development Bank says Africa needs about $170 billion annually to meet its infrastructure requirement. Secretary General of the bank says in 2016, the bank approved $7.8 billion to finance investment in Africa continent. In 2017, it was about $6.7 billion. This will help it to meet the infrastructure gap, while noting that the bank only approved $7 billion for all aspects of the high five priority projects. He added there was the need to diversify the source of Africa development through the promoting of the private sector. The National Cashew Association of Nigeria says efforts are being made to achieve the national production of 242,000 metric tons this year, 10% higher than last year's. National production increased from 175,000 metric tons in 2016 to 220,000 metric tons last year. President of the association, Mr. Tola Fasiru, says the improvement is expected following an increase in the number of plantations, good agricultural practices, improved seedlings and post-harvest storage and packaging practices by farmers. He noted that the association is working with the federal federal government to implement solutions to accelerate intensive processing of cashew nuts with added value and strengthened trade promotions. The association's mission, he said, is to improve Nigeria's position as one of the world's biggest cashew exporter by creating core values for global consumers and ensure high nutritional value and best quality products that are managed in accordance with the world's highest standards. Raw cashew nuts topped the list of major agricultural exports last year, followed by sesame seed, frozen shrimps, flour, meals of soya beans, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Cashew traded 13.5 billion naira in the second quarter of last year, representing an increase of 463% from 2.4 billion recorded in the first quarter. Operators seek review of aluminium standards to boost local production. Next is a graphic representation of commodities. Next, we take a look at the capital market. Equities market closed Thursday on negative territory as the NSE OSHA index depreciated by 0.48% to close at 41,107.81 basis points. Muplang Dakok has details.
Despite price gains that outweighed losses, transactions on the equity sector of the Nigerian Stock Exchange closed on a downward note Thursday. 320 million shares were traded in 4,482 deals valued at 320 million naira, making market capitalization dip to 14.8 trillion naira, while the all-share index lost 0.48%. Unity Bank topped the gainers chart to close at 1 naira 15 kobo. It was followed by Cement Company of Northern Nigeria and Jais Bank. On the other hand, international breweries emerged the day's highest price loser, shedding 47 naira. Top trades measured by volume were recorded by UBA, Access Bank and eTranzact.
Many thanks, Muplang. Now away from Nigeria. Thursday was a day of losses in most markets across the globe as investors monitor the trade talks between US and China. Muplang Dakok again has an outlook.
South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 lost as much as 2.22%. Nairobi SE20 depreciated by 0.72%. Namibia overall index, however, gained 2.59%, while Ghana's composite shed 0.18%. Many U.S. stocks declined as bank shares slipped and as the dollar advanced. Nasdaq depreciated by 0.18%. S&P 500 declined 0.23%, while Dow Jones appreciated by 0.02%. Stocks in Europe dropped as materials and technology companies recorded gains. FTSE lost 0.54%. DAX index dropped by 0.88%, and CAC went down 0.50%. In Asia, Nikkei depreciated by 0.16%. Hang Seng Index also closed negative at 1.34%, while Shanghai Index appreciated by 0.65%.
Let's now see how currencies are trading. And that's the much we can take on this edition of Business Express. The program returns Monday. I am Amina Nujaim saying keep thinking and doing business.